She's just waiting to die. Let's hurry it up so we can move on already. I played it twice. Not because I didn't hear it clearly the first time, but because my heart refused to believe it. The voice was unmistakable. My daughter. The one I carried for 9 months. The one I raised on my own. The one I gave my entire life to. She wasn't talking to me. She didn't know I was listening. But I was. And in the space of just 8 seconds my world cracked. I sat there in my kitchen chair. Same chair I'd had for 20 years. My tea had gone cold. The window was open. And outside, the birds were chirping like nothing had happened. But something had. Something I could never unhear. Something I could never unknow. She said I was just waiting to die. That I was in the way. That she needed me gone. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I just stared at the wall, my hand frozen midair. And for the first time in my entire life I understood something awful. My love for her had become a burden. My life an obstacle. That night I packed a small bag. Drove to a man I hadn't seen in over a decade, my old lawyer. I sat across from him, eyes swollen, voice steady. I said just 3 words. Words I never imagined I'd say. Change. Everything. Now. He looked at me. Long pause. No questions. Just a nod. Because he saw it too. Whatever was holding me together was gone. She would never expect it. She would walk into that lawyer's office weeks later, expecting signatures, bank accounts, and easy inheritance. But what she found shattered her. My name is Margaret Elaine Rowe. I'm 68 years old. A retired nurse. A widow. And for most of my life, a mother before anything else. I met my husband Thomas when I was 23. He made me laugh in the hospital cafeteria on my first week at County General. He brought me daisies every Sunday, even when we couldn't afford toothpaste some weeks. We were married 4 years before the cancer came. And 2 months before Emily's 3rd birthday, I buried him. There was no time to fall apart. No space to grieve. I had a child with wide eyes and curly hair who needed me to get up every single morning. And I did. I worked double shifts in the trauma wing. I stitched up strangers with a smile and came home with aching feet just to help her with math homework and make sure she never felt the hole I was carrying inside me. I sold my wedding ring to pay for her braces. Gave up the house we built together because the mortgage kept me awake at night. I put off vacations, surgeries, even a promotion, just to make sure she had piano lessons and prom dresses. First birthday without her dad. I sewed her a stuffed rabbit with my own hands. When she graduated high school, I sat in the front row, clapping so hard my palms stung. When she totaled her first car, I didn't yell. I hugged her and said, "We'll figure it out." And we did. Somehow we always did. There was never a man after Thomas. Not because no one asked, but because I didn't know how to be loved by anyone else. I didn't want to give my energy to someone who wasn't my child. I thought, if I loved her enough for 2 parents, she'd never feel the loss. I thought that was enough. I watched her become a woman. I was there for every heartbreak, every scraped knee, every late-night phone call when she couldn't sleep. She called me her best friend. And I believed her. Looking back now, I wonder if I loved her too much. If I made it too easy. If in trying to give her the world, I accidentally taught her that mine didn't matter. I was her rock. I thought she was mine too. But you never know someone's heart until you hear what they say when they think you're not listening. Emily got married on a Sunday afternoon in June. It was a small ceremony at a vineyard upstate. She wore my veil, something old, and smiled so wide I thought my heart would burst. But even in that joy, I noticed something. She held his hand more than she held mine. Her new last name sounded so final. His name was Daniel. 15 years older than her, already wealthy, with a son from a previous marriage and a home with a 3-car garage. He was polite, generous, the kind of man who orders wine by the region. I didn't know him long before he proposed, but I kept quiet, because she said she loved him, and because I wanted to believe she had finally found someone to protect her, the way I always tried to. The visits started slowing down after that. First once a week, then once a month. Calls went from daily to when she could. Holidays became optional. My birthday fell off her calendar 2 years in a row. And when I asked why she hadn't come by, she said, Things have been so crazy lately, Mom. You understand, right? And I said I did. Because that's what mothers do. When the arthritis in my hips got worse and the shortness of breath wouldn't go away, I didn't want to worry her. But eventually I had no choice. My doctor switched me to heart medication. I told Emily gently, hoping for something soft in return. She offered to send someone. And she did. A woman named Angela. Kind eyes. Quiet voice. The kind who folds your laundry without being asked. She showed up every afternoon, brought groceries, made sure I took my pills. She reminded me of the young nurses I used to train. I was grateful, and quietly disappointed, because I didn't want to help her. I wanted my daughter. But Emily always had a reason. You shouldn't be alone, Mom. Or, this is better than me rushing over after work. I nodded. But inside something small started bending. It was a Wednesday, late afternoon. The kind of day where nothing special happens. I was sitting in the living room, folding a blanket that didn't need folding, when my phone buzzed. A voice note. From Emily. I remember thinking, she must have meant to send a text. We hadn't spoken in a few days. Nothing unusual. We'd fallen into a pattern of polite distance. So I tapped play, expecting to hear a casual check-in. Maybe a question about prescriptions or the mail. She's just waiting to die. Let's hurry it up so we can move on already. At first, I thought I heard wrong. That maybe she was talking about someone else. But the pause that followed, the way her tone shifted back to laughter, it told me everything I needed to know. She didn't even realize she'd sent it. That was the worst part. There was no guilt in her voice. Just convenience. Impatience. I sat frozen. Not crying. Not angry. Just stunned. My hands trembled. But my eyes stayed dry, because even my tears were too ashamed to fall. That was my daughter, my only child. And in that moment, I knew everything I ever gave her meant nothing. I didn't call her back. I didn't reply. I just stood up, walked to my drawer and pulled out my lawyer's card. I drove to my lawyer's office. It was nearly 9 p.m. The lights were still on. I handed him the letter. Sat down. He looked at me like I'd walked in from a battlefield. I guess in a way I had. And I said 3 words I never thought I'd say about my own daughter. Change everything. Now, if this part broke your heart like it broke mine, hit that like button so I know I'm not alone. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Let's talk about it. After the voice note, everything changed. Not all at once, but like a curtain slowly pulling back. I started replaying things I hadn't thought twice about before. Conversations, glances, little comments I brushed aside. Suddenly they all felt different. Emily had been asking questions for months. Innocent at first. Do you still have that safe in the closet? Is your will still with Mr. Benton's firm? What exactly did Dad leave behind? I thought she was just being curious, maybe even protective. But now I realized she wasn't protecting me. She was preparing. I went through the house like a stranger, looking at everything with new eyes. Her last visit? She spent more time measuring the den than she did sitting with me. She took photos of the antique desk, said it would look great refinished. She opened the guest room closet and muttered something about Airbnb. It wasn't just planning. It was possession. She'd already started treating the house like it was hers, and me like a tenant whose lease was about to expire. 10 years ago, I had a minor heart scare. It was nothing serious, a short hospital stay, precautionary tests. But it shook me. That was the first time I thought about dying. About what would happen to everything I'd built. I didn't have much, but the house was paid off, and there were savings, bonds, a modest pension. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. Emily had just finished college. She was full of hope then, kind-hearted. She was still calling me 3 times a day. So I sat across from my lawyer, looked him in the eye, and said, she gets it all. Everything. If anything happens to me, I want her to be okay. I left his office feeling proud. Certain. I told myself that was what mothers did. Made sure their daughters never had to struggle the way they did. 10 years later, I walked into that same office. Only this time, I wasn't there to ensure she had everything. I was there to make sure she had nothing. Mr. Benton, Jack, he insisted I call him, looked older. White hair now. But his eyes were just as sharp. He stood when I walked in, took one look at me and said, "What happened?" I handed him the voice note on my phone. He didn't say a word, just listened. Then he stood, locked the door and said, "Let's begin." I told him I wanted a clean rewrite, a new will, no trace of the old one, everything legal, everything silent. I didn't want Emily to know until it was too late, not out of spite but because I needed her to understand something. I was not a waiting room for her inheritance. I was a person, a mother, a woman who had been made invisible in her own life. We spent 3 hours going over every detail. The house, the bonds, the jewelry she never noticed, the storage unit with boxes she hadn't touched since college. All of it transferred. Every last thing. And the heir? Angela. The woman who made sure I ate even when I lost my appetite. The one who read aloud to me when my eyes hurt. Who noticed when my socks didn't match. She never asked for anything. And yet, she gave more than anyone ever had since Thomas. It wasn't about the money, it was about the dignity, the grace, the care. In a world where my own daughter treated me like a fading obligation, Angela treated me like a person worth showing up for. Jack slid the folder into the cabinet, turned the key and looked at me. "If anything happens," he said, "she'll know the truth." I nodded. And for the first time in months I slept through the night. Emily had made her plans. So had I. Wait, did you see that coming? If your jaw dropped like mine did, tap the subscribe button right now. And ring that notification bell, because what happens next will leave you speechless. There's a photo I keep tucked away in the back of an old drawer. Emily must have been 5. She's standing in the front yard barefoot, holding a yellow balloon. Her curls are wild, her mouth wide open in a laugh. And just behind her me, in scrubs, tired, smiling anyway. That picture breaks my heart every time I look at it. Because that was the year I started working nights, just to keep us afloat. There was a time when I worked 3 jobs. One at the hospital, one at a diner, and one cleaning offices overnight. I'd come home as the sun came up, heat up frozen waffles, and sit across from her while she told me about the dreams she had. Sometimes I nodded off while she talked, and she'd gently pat my hand. She was 6. I was 32. And I was already older than I should have been. I remember sitting on our living room floor, counting coins from a tip jar to buy her school shoes. I remember lying to her about how fun it was to wear hand-me-downs so she wouldn't feel less than the girls with store-bought bows. I remember standing in the rain at the bus stop because we had one umbrella, and she needed it more than I did. And through all of it I told myself one day it would be worth it. One day she would understand. One day she would look back and see everything I gave. I held on to that like a lifeline. My mother, she wasn't soft like me. She was made of tough edges and tight buns and rules that never bent. I remember the last time we spoke. She warned me, said, "Children don't always become what you hoped." I laughed it off. I told her Emily was different. She said, "That's what I thought about you too." And we never really talked again after that. I was too proud. Too hurt. I thought she just didn't understand the kind of love I had for my daughter. Now all these years later, I hear her voice clearer than ever. Not because she was right, but because she wasn't wrong. The truth is I gave too much. I loved from a place of guilt. Guilt that she didn't have her father. Guilt that I couldn't give her the things other girls had. Guilt that I missed birthdays, PTA meetings, talent shows. So I overcompensated. I said yes when I should have said no. I excused behavior I should have challenged. I confused silence for peace. And in doing so, I raised a woman who thought love meant no consequences. People talk about motherly instinct like it's this guiding light. But sometimes it's a fog. You're so close to it you can't see the harm being done, until it's behind you. Until you're sitting in your chair, listening to your daughter call you dead before you're gone. Why didn't I confront her? Why didn't I scream, demand answers, ask why? Because part of me still wanted to believe there was something good left in her. That maybe I misunderstood. That maybe she was angry or tired or careless with her words. But another part of me, the part that stayed up every night replaying that voice note, knew better. Some things don't need to be said twice. Some memories never fade. If you believe some wounds run deeper than time, share this video with someone who understands. And tell me in the comments, Have you ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it? I watched Jack slide the final document into a thick envelope. My new will, notarized, witnessed, and legally binding. Everything was now in order. My signature sealed it. My name, and a lifetime of quiet obedience, no longer meant open access. It was done. He asked me if I wanted to tell Emily anything. I shook my head. I told him I'd already said everything I needed to. And when the time came, the envelope would do the talking for me. I walked out of that office lighter than I had felt in years. Not because I had punished her, but because for the first time in decades, I had done something solely for myself. Something honest. Something final. Something quiet. I drove home without the radio. Just the sound of tires against pavement. And my own breath, steady in my chest. I passed the bakery where I used to take Emily after church. The school where I volunteered when she was 10. The corner where we once waited for a bus in the pouring rain. It all felt distant. Like a photo album you love, but no longer open. The next day she called. Said she wanted to stop by. She brought me soup, sat with me for 20 minutes. Then in a tone so light I almost missed it, she said, "I've been thinking maybe we should get something in writing. In case anything happens. You know, power of attorney. Just a formality." I smiled. I nodded. I said, "That's a good idea." She thought I was folding. That the guilt, the loneliness, the frailty she projected onto me would make me obedient. She didn't know I had already taken the wheel. That the ship had already turned. She didn't know I was no longer afraid of what would happen if she walked away. Because she already had. That evening I started journaling. Nothing poetic. Just facts. Times. Dates. Details. Her visits. Her calls. The way she looked at the silverware drawer. The way she flinched when I mentioned my lawyer's name. I wrote down everything. Not because I needed proof, but because I needed clarity. Each word I wrote felt like a small act of defiance. Not rage. Not revenge. But truth. The kind of truth no one can take from you. No matter how many times they rewrite the story. Angela noticed the change before anyone else. One evening she made tea, sat across from me and said, "You're holding something. But it doesn't look like pain anymore." I didn't answer. I just smiled. Because she was right. Now this is where things change. If you're still watching, you're one of us. The ones who know that quiet women carry the loudest storms. Hit like, share this with someone who loves a good twist, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories. I passed in my sleep. No pain, just a slow fade into rest. In the room where I raised my daughter, beneath the blanket I stitched with my own hands 20 years ago. Angela found me the next morning. She called the doctor, then the lawyer. She didn't cry loudly. She just held my hand. And in that stillness I knew my story wasn't ending. It was just being handed over. Emily wore black. She sat in the front pew. She looked composed. She greeted everyone with a smile that said, "I did what I could." People patted her shoulder and whispered things like, "She raised you so well, and you were lucky to have her." She nodded. She accepted the compliments like trophies. And why wouldn't she? She thought she'd done enough. After the service, she went straight to Jack's office. She had an appointment. She thought it was a formality. A signature here, a transfer there. A quick sorting of what was hers now. She didn't know the envelope was sealed. That Jack hadn't even opened it himself until that morning. That what was inside would not go the way she expected. She sat in his office, legs crossed, pen in hand. He placed the envelope on the table and said, "Before we begin, there's a letter. Your mother asked that it be read out loud." She smirked, probably thinking it was sentimental. Final goodbye. She didn't know it was the first time I'd spoken to her honestly in years. "Emily, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And you're sitting here expecting what you were never entitled to. You were once the love of my life. My reason for waking up. My reason for pushing through a world that never made room for women like me. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as a person. You stopped showing up with love and started arriving with calculations. You treated my life like an inconvenience. Like a countdown clock you couldn't wait to run out. I raised you with everything I had. I gave up my health, my youth, and my heart. And in return you gave me absence and silence. And one voice note that told me more about your love than any hug ever did. But not everyone saw me that way. Angela saw me. She made time, not excuses. She listened not out of obligation but out of care. She didn't owe me anything, but she gave me dignity. So here's the truth. She will receive the house, the bonds, the accounts, the jewelry, everything I ever worked for. Not because I wanted to punish you, but because I wanted to honor her. I hope this moment wakes something in you, Emily. I hope one day you understand that love is not owed. It is earned. And you? Stopped earning mine a long time ago. Jack folded the letter. Emily didn't say anything for a long time. And when she did, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't even anger. It was confusion. Not because she didn't understand what had happened, but because for the first time in her life she had been told no, and the world didn't rearrange itself for her. Angela signed the papers. With steady hands and kind eyes. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She just said, "I'll take care of it. I'll take care of everything." And I believed her. In the end, the silence did what words never could. It left her with the weight of everything she chose not to be. And someone else with the home she never truly valued. Emily didn't take it well. The truth rarely arrives with comfort. She stormed out of the lawyer's office shaking, red-faced, her voice breaking in a way that used to move me. But this time it didn't. She accused Angela. Loudly. Publicly. Said she manipulated me. Took advantage. Said it was elder abuse. Said it was theft, betrayal, brainwashing. Angela didn't flinch. She didn't shout back. She stood there, soft but unshaken. And then she said one sentence. Just one. She saw me, when you didn't. Emily froze. Just for a second. Because even she knew it was true. 2 weeks later, Emily tried to contest the will. She hired an expensive lawyer. They tried to paint me as confused. Said I wasn't of sound mind. That Angela had undue influence. Jack came prepared. With journal entries. Medical records. Audio recordings of our meetings. My handwriting. My signature. My voice. The judge read my letter. Twice. Emily left that courtroom with nothing. Not because I hated her, but because I finally loved myself enough to set a boundary she couldn't cross. She tried to spin the story, called family, old friends, anyone who'd listen, but the words fell flat. People remembered how she never came around, how she skipped holidays, how Angela was always the one picking up prescriptions, driving me to appointments, fixing the leak in the kitchen. It didn't take long before her version of the story collapsed under its own weight. Daniel, her husband, said very little. But silence can be a scream. He asked her one night, what kind of daughter forgets her mother until there's something to inherit? She didn't have an answer. And from that day forward, things began to fracture. I wasn't there to see it, but I imagine the silence at their dinner table got louder. The house bigger. The love thinner. That's the thing about reckoning. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it seeps in quietly, through the cracks left by our choices. I imagine Emily still drives past the house sometimes, the one she used to measure and mentally redecorate. Only now, the curtains are drawn by someone who remembers where the light used to fall in the afternoons. The walls hold stories that she chose not to hear. There is no joy in her pain. Only the ache of knowing it didn't have to be this way. That she had years to change course. To show up. To see me. But she didn't. And in the end, love unreturned becomes love removed. I never got to say these things out loud, but I wrote them down. Every night. In ink that bled across pages older than I ever thought I'd become. And now if you're still here, it's time you hear what I couldn't say. There comes a point in a woman's life where she no longer explains herself. Where she no longer begs to be seen. That point came for me, too late to fix what was broken, but just in time to protect what remained. Emily believed I would always be there. That my silence meant surrender. That my softness was weakness. But she never realized that quiet women are the ones you should never underestimate. In the end, I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand. I simply chose. I chose to be remembered by someone who brought me flowers without a calendar. Who sat beside me without a phone in her hand. Who didn't share my blood, but shared something far rarer, her time. Here's what I know now. In my silence, I taught her the loudest lesson. Kindness cannot be faked forever. And love must be earned. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, cry, or inspired you, leave a comment and tell me your thoughts. And hey, don't just subscribe, join our family. Turn on that bell so you never miss a story that needs to be told.